Much like battlecruisers, battleships typically sank with large loss of life if and when they were destroyed in the battle. Many battleships have been sunk during World War II either by torpedoes or airstrikes, and as the battleship began to fall out of favor, some captured capital ships were decommissioned, stripped, and deliberately sunk in nuclear weapon tests. Today, we'll list out all the sunken battleships of the Imperial Japanese Navy and the US Navy during World War II. So the first battleship of the United States Navy that was hit during World War II was the USS Arizona BB-39. On 7th December 1941, Arizona was hit by Japanese torpedo bombers that dropped armored piercing bombs during the attack on Pearl Harbor. After one of their bombs detonated in a magazine, she exploded violently and sank with the loss of 1,177 officers and crewmen. Unlike many of the other ships destroyed or damaged that day, the Arizona was irreversibly damaged by the magazine explosion despite the Navy's efforts to salvage sections of the ship. Up next is the USS Utah BB-31. This was the second and final member of the Florida class of dreadnought battleships. This U.S. battleship was also hit on the same day as the USS Arizona. 6 torpedoes were launched against Utah. 2 of them struck the battleship, which caused significant flooding, and the Utah turned over and sank rapidly. The great majority of her crew managed to flee, but 58 men were killed in the attack. Up next is the Asahi. The submarine USS Salmon spotted Asahi during the night of May 25, 1942, 100 miles south of Cape Padaran, Indochina. Of Salmon's 4 torpedoes, 2 hit the ship in her port central boiler room and aft spaces. Asahi sank just minutes after being struck. The attack claimed the lives of 16 men, the ship's commander, and 582 crew members were rescued by CH-9. The next battleship that was sunk was the Hiei battleship. She and her sister ship Kirishima fought American cruisers and destroyers on the evening of November 13, 1942. Hiei was crippled by American warships after inflicting significant damage on American cruisers and destroyers. She was scuttled on the evening of November 14, 1942 after being attacked by the USS Enterprise. On the same night of 14th November, the Japanese battleship Kirishima was fatally crippled by the battleship USS Washington. Washington, undetected, started firing at midnight on Kirishima from 5,800 yards or 5.3 kilometers, which were easily capable of penetrating Kirishima's armor at their maximum range using 16-inch or 45 caliber guns. Kirishima capsized and sank in the early morning on 15th November 1942 in Iron Bottom Sound. Up next is the Musashi, which was a Japanese battleship that was commissioned in mid-1942. Musashi was lost by an estimated 19 torpedo and 17 bomb strikes from American carrier-based aircraft during the Battle of Leyte Gulf on October 24, 1944. Her crew was rescued in large numbers, with more than half of them surviving. Her wreck was located in March 2015 by a team of researchers hired by Microsoft co-founder. The next ship that had sunk after the Musashi was the Fuso. During the Battle of Surigoi Strait, she was also hit by torpedoes and naval gunfire in the early hours of October 25, 1944. According to survivors, the ship sunk after 40 minutes of flooding, despite other stories claiming the ship broke in half and both parts stayed afloat and blazing for an hour. Only 10 of the few dozen crew members who fled made it back to Japan. Up next is the Yamashiro. In October 1944, she was forced into frontline duty at the Battle of Surigao Strait, the Battle of Leyte Gulf's southernmost battle. Yamashiro was sunk by torpedoes and naval gunfire after furious night battle in the early hours of October 25th against a superior American and Australian force. Only 10 crew members of the estimated 1,636 officers and crew on board survived. Next is the Kongo. Kongo fought in many major naval actions in the Pacific War during the World War II. On November 21, 1944, the submarine USS Sea Lion torpedoed and sank the Kongo while traversing the Formosa Strait. Kongo is believed to have sunk in 110 meters of water, approximately 55 nautical miles northwest of Keelung. She was the only Japanese battleship sunk by a submarine during World War II. Up next is the Yamato. In April 1945, Yamato was sent on a one-way mission to Okinawa for safeguarding the island. The task force was detected by U.S. submarines and planes south of Kyushu, and she was sunk by American carrier-based bombers and torpedo bombers on 7 April 1945, killing the majority of her crew. Yamato was hit by at least 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs. There may have been 2 more torpedo and bomb hits, but this is not confirmed. Up next is the Haruna battleship. The U.S. Fleet's Task Force 38 launched a series of aircraft strikes on Kure Naval Base on July 24, 1945 in order to eliminate the final remains of Japan's navy. The battleship Haruna was struck by a single bomb that did minor damage. She was struck by 8 bombs from Task Force 38 aircraft 4 days later and sunk on 28 July 1945. Next is the battleship Settsu. During the U.S. Navy carrier air attack on Kure on 24 July 1945, Settsu was attacked by 30 Grumman F-6F Hellcat fighters near Etajima. She was struck by 1 bomb that killed 2 men and wounded another 2. 5 near misses started a serious leak in the starboard engine room. 4 days later, the ship was again attacked by aircraft carrier that hit her twice more with bombs. She was abandoned the next day. On 28 July, she was struck by 5 450-kilogram bombs dropped by F-4 Yukazair fighters from USS Hancock and 11 more bombs dropped by other aircraft from TF-58. Hiei took on a 15-degree list to starboard and sank in shallow water. Salvage efforts were abandoned that same day, although some AA guns were stripped from her wreck and 50 persons were killed. The last battleship of the Japanese Navy that was sunk was Hyuga. During the bombing of Kure on 24 July, she was struck by 10 bombs that blew off part of her stem, destroyed her bridge, and started major fires. Over 200 sailors were killed and 600 wounded by the attack. Progressive flooding caused the ship to sink in shallow water over the next several days, and her crew was ordered to remove all easily accessible weapons. And that, guys, was a list of all the sunken battleships of the Imperial Japanese Navy and the US Navy during World War II. Thank you guys for viewing in. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.